So it's really at this time, at the end of the 80s and the 90s, where this build-up of personal home computers, and there's been an evolution of game systems from the computers I've been mentioning that I was programming to kind of the big ones at the end, kind of towards the latter end of the 80s, which were the Commodore Amiga. I'm forgetting what the other one was, but the Commodore Amiga was probably the biggest one of them, and this was kind of like the really cool gaming systems. They were the kind of the first to have the really cool almost the flowing graphics like we're used to today, and some of my friends had some of these while I was in my technical college, and that was really exciting to see. So you've got all of this progression in home computers, really, which is mostly the gaming market, turning into these really cool gaming systems at the end of the 80s. And then, at the same time, you've got the PC being born, you've got the Apple Mac at kind of the same time, which are kind of being born through the 70s and 80s, but not really in full view until the end of the 80s and early 90s. And so that's when the computer kind of really, as we know it today, really took off. So the idea of a PC. And you know the rest is history, that they had Pentium chips, and every year they'd have a better chip and it was faster. You know, back in those days though, we might have 1 meg was a big hard drive, and then you had 10 meg, and then you had 20 meg, and these were big hard drives. And of course, as we evolved our desire to use computers, we have to evolve the hardware. So as people want to do more and more things with computers, they had to have more and more memory, and more hard disk space, and we never seem to have enough. We always want more disk space, more memory, because we're doing more intricate and cool things on the computer. So that's really been the journey from like the end of the 80s until today, as far as the computers are concerned, is this this gaining of more speed, more hard drive, and more complex software. Because before that time, there really wasn't graphical software. It really didn't exist. And then since that time, that's really what I would call the modern era of computing, is the graphical user interface on a PC or a Mac, and that's what we're used to. So then, right after that, now you can have either at home or in business, you can do word processing, you can have art programs, and you can have all of the other software that we're used to, which is just evolving, got better and better and more complicated. Spreadsheets, word processing, databases, and everything else. And I saw that progression from the late 80s up until today, and it's been an incredible speed of invention, absolutely amazing. So, like now we can do on a fairly small computer, like on one of the decent Macs, we can do pretty powerful 3D animations and such like. Whereas it took like a supercomputer. There was a film called Tron in the 80s that had to use a Cray supercomputer worth gazillions of dollars to render the graphics it was doing. Whereas now you can do those graphics on a Mac or on a powerful PC. So so you're talking about the difference in millions of dollars to a few $1,000s to do the same job. And here's what I'm going to get to the theory of all of this now. So I'm going to talk about two sides, and the really two important sides I'm going to talk about are the business side and the gaming side. The business side I'm going to call productivity. So the productivity side and the entertainment side. So first let's talk about the entertainment side, because I think this is a really ginormous impact on society. So when I was growing up, when we didn't have computers, we didn't have computer games, we had a TV, so we could sit in front of a TV and waste our time, I suppose. But as far as playing was concerned, I played. I played with Action Man, which is the British version of G.I. Joe. I was outside all the time playing soccer. I loved playing soccer. I loved, even if it was in my own yard, on my own, if necessary. But I'd also be playing with my friends all the time. We'd be playing soccer, and we'd be playing kind of the night games that people play, all those kind of things. We'd always be playing and be active. And or building Lego, whatever it is we used to do when we were young. And we didn't have these computer games where you could be seduced into sitting in front of a screen for hours on end. It just didn't exist. And so we would interact more with our friends, and we would be more active. And I have seen the transition from activity and interactive games between people to inactivity and being addicted to sitting in front of a screen playing these animated games. Now, without question, so nobody saw this coming because it was just cool. It was so cool that we had these computer games. And the first ones I played were adventure games, and those games were where you would, it was just text-based, and the text would give you a scenario, and you had to type instructions, and you'd have different reactions and results based on what you've typed, and these were adventure games, and you'd have to figure out solutions to problems. So there was at least some mental energy going into that, but I could sit for hours on end playing these adventure games, and I really liked it. And then it turned into the more graphical games, kind of the forerunners of Mario games. One of my favourites was Manic Miner. There was Jet Set Willy and Manic Miner on the Sinclair Spectrum that we used to play a lot, and that was the forerunner. And then Donkey Kong was invented around about that time. And these were these graphical games. And it was really exciting. We used to love it. I used to love anything that was Star Wars games, so those were my favourite. And then I noticed, I mean, looking back, my brother had one of these computers before I did because he was able to save up money and buy things. And he would just spend all evening, every evening playing on these games. And his friends would come around and they would play on these games. And from that point onwards, society has changed. This is my opinion. Society has changed big time for youth. Now, we already had TV, but we didn't have like 1,000 channels of cable. That's another thing we could talk about. But now we had these computer games to take us away from activity and the kind of things we used to do. Now, I don't know if playing computer games in itself is bad. I don't think so. But I think playing computer games consistently and not interacting with people, I think that is bad. And I have friends who work in the MTC in Provo who tell me that the missionaries coming to be trained these days, most of them don't know how to interact. They just have no people skills. Why do we have no people skills? Because we all spend all of our time not interacting with people. This isn't just computers, but computer games is a big issue. And another thing that I was speaking to church leaders in Provo who were telling me that the biggest problem they're having with young married couples, there are two big problems they're having with married couples in the church. One is pornography. That's a big issue, and please deal with it if you're having issues with it. Get rid of it, get it out of your life. It isn't right, and it's immoral, and it will hurt you, and it will it will really ruin your life. So get out of it, and get out of it now. The second issue is computer games, and they were talking about these issues as if they're both basically as bad as each other. So a young couple, they're getting married, and then in most cases the husband is spending all the time playing computer games. I don't understand that at all personally, but that's kind of the social impact of these computer games. People are addicted to them and just love them so much they could spend hours and hours playing them all day, every day. I know many students here on campus who spend so much time playing games, and the games are really cool, don't get me wrong. They're incredible graphics and amazing what they do, especially to somebody like me who's seen it evolve from these silly little tennis games where you're just going blip, it's just a little dot that's blipping from one side of the screen to the other, and that's your tennis game, to these incredibly interactive games where you've got these avatars, and they're almost 3D, and they're just exciting games. And I don't mind my kids playing games from time to time, but I restrict it. With my children, I restrict the time that they play games. Number one, they have to do everything else they were supposed to do. They have to do their schoolwork, and they have to do their chores. And they have to have some kind of exercise. Once they've done those things, I don't mind them playing games. I mean, I remember I used to watch TV quite a lot growing up, but I was also doing other things. I was a breakdancer in my teenage years, and also a soccer player, so I was really active. So it didn't really matter so much that I also spent a lot of time watching TV. But so with my children, I just make sure that they've done all those other things. And if they do something wrong or naughty or they get punished, the first thing to go is their game, and they might lose privileges for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And here's another thing I've noticed, and this is really what you need to think about in your own future, what you're doing now if you're playing a lot of games, and also your children for the future. Is I've noticed quite clearly that my children are more aggressive to each other and to other people when they spend a lot of time playing computer games. And when they don't, they get sulky because they're not winning, and they just want to get to the end of this game, and if I want to turn it off, they're upset because they're in the middle of it, all this kind of thing. And when they're not having computer games at all in their lives, they're more cheerful, and they don't have this stress that they've got through playing computer games. So my perspective on that, and maybe it's not the same for everybody, but I would think very carefully about that we're better off not playing computer games, or at least very restricted. And we need to be socializing more, and we need to be teaching our children to interact. They're going to grow up and have to serve the Lord and share the gospel. How on earth are they going to share the gospel if they can't even talk to people? If they spend all their time playing computer games or texting and they don't actually know how to interact, how are they going to stop somebody in the street and have a pleasant conversation where they can share the gospel and preach the truth and share the wonder of the gospel of Jesus Christ with people if they have no idea how to communicate? This is a big deal, and this in my opinion is to do with the evolution and the invention of computer gaming machines, which are incredible now, without question, but they are overused, and they are a pain and a problem in our society. They are a problem on this campus. I know that there are people who should be doing homework who are playing computer games or other things. And like I said, as long as it's in moderation, that's fine. I don't play them these days because I get beat too easy by my kids, but I don't mind playing a computer game. The Wii's kind of fun, where you play a tennis game, where at least then you actually stand up and active, you're throwing the thing around. But maybe even the dance kind of machines where you're active as well, I think that's pretty good too. But in moderation. And that's definitely something I'm preaching you today. Computer games in moderation, in strict moderation. And the same would be true for the television as well. And because there are more important things. Our following the gospel and keeping our commitments is the #1 most important thing in the world. And in that context, our family and spending quality time with our wife and with our children, and then doing our school responsibilities, and then our work responsibilities, and all of our church assignments, all those things all come before our personal entertainment and computer